Welcome to the debate for Ward 2 in the City of Clinton. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I welcome you to this candidates debate. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We neither support nor oppose candidates or political parties. However, we do urge people to be politically active to make sure that they exercise their right to vote on Election Day. How important it is for our local elections. These city services touch us every single day: the streets, the water, the fire and police protection, parks and recreation, and more. The primary election is April 6th. It will be a Republican primary in Clinton, since there is already just one Democrat per position. Today we have two Republican candidates for Ward 2. This ward is on the south side of the city, south of I-20, and the polling place is Wildwood Baptist Church at 101 Auburn Drive. I'd like now to introduce the candidates. From left to right, Jared Hardy, thank you for coming, and Jim Martin, thank you very much. Serving as our moderator is longtime Clintonian news director at iHeartRadio, Randy Bell. So glad you're doing this for us, Randy. Serving as our timekeepers are league members Marianne Everett and Carolyn Towns. Our videographer is Mark Jones, the communications director for the city of Clinton, and his intern Carly. We thank the City of Clinton for allowing us to use this facility here at Brighton. You will note that we're following COVID safety protocol, and we have very few in the audience. For the debate format, we will give candidates 2 minutes each for their opening statements. They will answer several questions and then give closing statements. They will be allowed 1 minute if they wish to respond to the other candidates' answers. A drawing was held a few minutes ago for the order of speaking. And now, we're ready for the debate on Ward 2 in Clinton. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kay. And as she mentioned, we've been following those COVID-19 protocols. Everybody's been masked up here up until this point, but we've asked the candidates to unmask so that we can hear them more clearly as they respond to the questions. We're going to start out with opening remarks, and Mr. Martin will have the first statement.
I found a map of the city of Clinton dated 1960. I was born in 1959 here in Clinton, so that was what Clinton looked like when I was born. I looked at that map, and the north boundary line of Clinton was Northside Drive. And interesting, the north side of Clinton was Northside Drive. The south boundary line was Highway 80. On the west, it was the houses behind Von Edith Lane in Bird Heights. On the east, it was just about where Morrison Drive was. So I have, during my lifetime, I have seen Clinton grow from between Northside Drive and Highway 80 to what we are today. Again, born and raised in Clinton. I was also in the last class in Clinton that went from first grade through junior high at the school facility where the MC housing is now behind Kroger. Always seemed they were building schools right behind when I went, and so I stayed in the same place all of that time. Did go to what was then the new high school, which is now the junior high. And again, I'm a good, solid Clinton Arrow. My wife, Renee, is also a Clinton Arrow. She is the school nurse for the Clinton Public School District. A lot of folks know her as Nurse Renee. Anyone that had kids going through school, she quite often cleaned and bandaged some knees and elbows of folks going through school. My two children, Emily and Ryan, are both Arrows as well, too. After graduating from Clinton, I went to Mississippi College and got a business degree, business finance, and then went to law school at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. Thank you.
All right, opening statement, Mr. Hardy.
Let me just first start by saying thank you to Kay, the League, Women Voters. Randy, thank you for moderating today. And also thank you to my opponent, Jim Martin, Alderman Martin, for being here today. I'd also like to say thank you to my wife, who's in the audience today. Thank you, honey, for being here today, and also my campaign manager, Whitney. I appreciate the support that you've given me over the last several weeks. I'd also like to say thank you to the residents of Ward 2. I can't tell you just how proud I am to be running to represent you and your families. Nothing can give me more Nothing we need. It's such a privilege. And I can promise you that if elected, I will work hard to never, ever let you down. You see, I can say that because, you know, for my family and I, Clinton is our forever home. This is home for us. My kids attend the Clinton Public Schools. They play soccer, baseball, and flag football in Tri-City Park. They practice CrossFit, Cairo CrossFit, with the owners Kevin and Vicki Rum, good friends. My son does parkour at the Clinton Tumble and Cheer. So we're invested in Clinton. My kids love Clinton. They call it home. My wife Jill is a member of the Junior Civic League, has been now for a couple of years. She's also the treasurer of Eastside Elementary for the last 2 years. We loved it so much, in fact, that when my father retired, we moved my father and my mother here. So they also live here. Quickly, they got involved in the community. Now they're actually on the Homeowners Association for Twin Lakes, over on the other side of town. We also moved my mother-in-law Cindy here, right? So Cindy is actually the office manager now for FUMC. So we're vested in Clinton. This is our home. It's why I want to run. I want to work to bring people together, to help make tough decisions that will be in the best interest of Clinton and the families that live here in Ward 2. I'm going to bring 26 years of business experience creating successful strategies for multi-million-dollar companies. And so I'm excited to be here today. I look forward to potentially serving.
All right, thank you for those statements, and we'll move on to our questions, which were prepared and approved by the League of Women Voters. And first of all, we just want to ask each of the candidates to go into a little more detail about their qualifications and experience that would make them the best person for this job on the Board of Aldermen. And we'll start with Mr. Hardy.
Thank you again, Randy. So I started thinking about experiences that I would lay upon. I mentioned my 26 years of business experience. What I didn't mention yet, though, is I'm also a professor at Millsaps. You see, I got my MBA right here in Mississippi in Jackson at Millsaps University, in which they offered me the opportunity to come back to be a professor of management. I teach strategic management, managing people there at the school as well. I've also had the privilege of being able to serve as the president of the Clinton Chamber for the past year, and before that as the president-elect. I've also served on the board of directors for the United Way of West Central Mississippi. I served on the board of directors for the Mississippi chapter of the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation. In my business world, I've also been involved with projects for capital development that range from $2 million up to $85 million. So I think, again, I would lean hard on my business experience and my business knowledge to enrich the city of Clinton. I would enhance the quality of life. I would improve economic development. I'd also support Clinton's long-standing tradition and reputation for excellence in education. How do you do that? You work closely with the city council. You work closely again with the mayor to find common ground, to work together to better, not only just Ward 2, I think, but the entire city of Clinton.
All right, we'll ask Mr. Martin to tell us a little bit about your experience and qualifications that would make you the best choice for this job.
As I started my opening, again, I am born and raised and educated, invested in Clinton. I own residential property and business properties here too. I did get a degree in business finance from Mississippi College. I got a law degree from Baylor. And I draw on my business experience and my legal experience every day. I have represented businesses in business transactions and also in consultation and with them on all sides, all kinds of business matters, representing consumers as well on transactional matters, litigation matters as well too. I spell that out in some of my Facebook campaign, Facebook ad, if you want to look at that in a little more detail. But I have both the experience in business and in law and do use that at all times. I have represented government entities over the years. We represented the state of Mississippi in a governmental fraud case that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. We were successful in winning, argued it before the District Court of Appeals and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and hoped to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court, but we won it before having the opportunity to do that. So I've represented government, represented people with issues with government as well too. So I've been on all sides of consumer and business issues and governmental issues. In working with the City of Clinton government, I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 12 years, 10 years as the chairman, and then I served 7 years as alderman in Ward 2. So I've got a wide variety of experience, business and law on all sides of the issues, as well as with government. And that experience, I think, is hard to match, and I think experience matters.
All right, now that we know a little bit more about both of these gentlemen, I want to ask each of them to think for a moment about what they see as their vision for the city of Clinton as we look toward the next 5, 10, 20 years. And we'll start with you, Mr. Martin.
Jesus told Peter in Matthew 16:18, "Upon this rock I will build my church." Jesus was using that as an example to say you kind of have a strong foundation in what you do. We need to have a foundation, a strong foundation in Clinton to continue the growth of things too. I don't think that the Persia had Yazoo clay. That we have in Clinton, I think they have a lot of sand that they had to work on to build their foundations. But we in Clinton, we have infrastructure needs and things that need to be taken care of. And upon that rock, we need to build our town. We need to make sure that we are taking care of the things that we have and keeping them up in good shape, and then looking at expanding and inviting new people to come to town. So my vision for the city of Clinton is, number one, to protect what we have, to not let it deteriorate, to take care of what we have, and then to look to expand. And that's both in the business sector and the residential sector as well, too. For businesses, we need to make sure that we spend our money with our local businesses anytime we have a chance to do so in Clinton. Or we need to attract new residential growth and new subdivisions that come into town as well, too. That needs to be good, orderly growth of what we do. So our vision for the city, again, is to protect, to make sure that we keep in the best possible shape what we have, and then promote the city to other residences and business so that we continue to grow in an orderly and prosperous fashion.
Mr. Hardy, your vision for the city.
Thank you, Randy. When I think about my vision for Clinton, it really comes, if you will, on a four-legged stool. First is quality of life. I think about planning and investment in our neighborhoods to make sure that they are the safest. I know we're the third safest, but I think we should be the safest place to live and the most attractive place to live in the state of Mississippi. I think about upgrading and enhancing our park system because that gives our children places to play. It also attracts new young families that want to live here. That will help make our city the best place to live, work, and play. I think about creating a renewed focus on creating spaces that encourage investment into our city, that encourage growth in our city. The second leg of that stool will be economic development. Here, I agree with you. I think we need to pursue common sense growth by planning and selecting the kind and even where development should happen that doesn't sacrifice our core values as a community. That is part of what makes Clinton so very, very special. The third leg will be education. We have to continue to invest in our children. They are the foundation of the city as well as the state. We have to continue to support an education system that prepares students not just for today's jobs, but tomorrow's jobs in technology, office, manufacturing. And last but not least, and nobody wants to talk about this one, but there's got to be a high level of cooperation and collaboration among the city's government, that includes the mayor, the city council, as well as also the development and business community. I'm going to go on record today as saying we can disagree without being disagreeable. We can still work together. There's no quote that says nothing much happens in a community unless it's desired by leadership. It's the alderman's job to create vision. It's the alderman's job to be able to talk to our citizens and set the pace for our entire community. However, unless there's common ground, unless there's some common concern and some common agreement, how do we ever step forward together? I think that those four things are important. I think that's my vision for Clinton. I hope it's yours as well.
Mr. Martin, you have 60 seconds for a follow-up, if you care to make it.
No, thank you.
All right, we'll move on then to the next question, and it's about public safety. And you've talked about Clinton ranking as the third safest city, and it's an issue that affects all of us. We're talking about the police department all the way to the court system. We have to do everything possible as a city to prevent criminal activity and then prosecute those who cause harm. So I'm wanting to know from each of you, what would you do as a member of the board to promote public safety, to make Clinton a safer city? We'll start with you, Mr. Hardy.
Yeah, thank you, good evening. So Clinton has been recognized as the third safest city in Mississippi. And once again, I think that is something to be proud of, but I do think that there is still work to be done. I know there's been a tremendous amount of work done in adding actual forces to our police department, with helping to get them better equipped. But as I mentioned, I still think that there's work to be done. When I think about safety for Clinton, I think it starts with the people who provide the very blanket of safety that we get to actually have. So what would I do? I start by sitting down with my good friend, Chief Lightridge, and asking him, what does the fire department need, not just today, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I'm not a fire expert. My opponent's not a fire expert. Chief Lightridge is. I also sit down with Police Chief Heyman and ask him from the police department side, what does Clinton need, not just today, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because once again, my opponent is also not a police expert, and neither am I. I think we have to rely on the people that provide the blankets of safety that we have and make sure that they are well equipped, to make sure they have all the technology that they need. The other thing I think is important, and I would do this in the first week, because I know budgets is the very first project we take on as Alderman. I would challenge the city council, also the mayor, to start doing wage surveys, because I'm tired of losing great officers to other cities. I don't want to see them leave. I want to see them continue to raise their families right here in Clinton. And we can't do that if we're not competitive with the areas that surround Jackson. So I continue to plan. I continue to invest. I make sure again that I voted for things like the judge that we have here in Clinton. I think that's made a tremendous difference. Again, at the end of the day, we just have to work to provide our first responders all the tools and all the resources that they need to do their job.
Mr. Martin, as an incumbent, what have you done on the board, and what would you continue to do if reelected to improve public safety?
I would compare our police and our fire department with anybody, anywhere. And I believe that we stand head and shoulders above on that. We have just got a tremendous group of fire and police employees in the city of Clinton. What we have done over the 7 years that I've been an alderman, we have increased the number of police officers that are out patrolling our streets. We have talked to the police department, the police chief, to find out what their needs were. And we have substantially increased the equipment and the training for our officers. We have new service revolvers for all of our police officers. We've got some big guns that we got for them as well, too. We've got brought in body cameras for all of our officers. We've improved our communications, bulletproof vest. We have invested heavily in equipment for our police department. And for our fire department, we've done the same thing too. We have asked what they needed, and we have responded for what their needs were. We have increased the number of fire personnel in our city. We have a new fire truck, we have a new fire station. All of those things have been added while I've been an alderman for Ward 2. I think we can never spend enough money in support of our police and fire. We do have budgetary concerns, but we have tried to grow our departments, again, to fully equip them with the most modern technology and support them in every way that we can. And I think that it has shown in the results with being the third safest city in the state, and our fire rating dropped during this term as well, too. So I think we've been very successful.
Mr. Hardy, a follow-up?
Yeah. When I think about safety within the city of Clinton, I also think your track record matters. Because as I think about safety, what I would ask Jim is that when he says we, who are we referring to? Look at the track record. Look at what has been voted on and voted against. Look at the budgets that were voted for and voted against. Look at the adding of our judge here in Clinton, who voted for, who voted against. I think it's easy to set up here and say that we have done this and we have done this. I applaud the leaders in our community that have actually come forward to add additional resources to our police department as well as our fire department. My question sometimes, why someone will vote no?
Mr. Martin, a response?
I'm not sure that I always all the way followed that. It seemed to imply that I voted against the things that I just talked about that we've done well, and that's just not the case. I fully supported our police and fire and voted in favor of these adding positions and equipment.
Let's talk economic development now, a priority for every elected official, certainly. Let's talk about what you would do, and in your case, Mr. Martin, what you have done as a member of the board and what you would do in the future to promote additional commercial, retail, industrial, restaurants, you name it, all the economic development amenities that we can get here in Clinton.
The number one thing that we need to do is support the businesses we have. Every dollar that we can spend in Clinton, we need to spend with our businesses here. I know there are some things, regrettably, that we can't find in Clinton, but anytime we have the opportunity to support our local businesses, we need to do that. But also send the message out to other folks that we do support our local businesses, so that helps attract new businesses to come to town. We both want to support our smaller, locally owned businesses, sometimes called mom and pops. We'd like to see some more of those in town. I was driving down Clinton Boulevard the other day, and there were 5 or 6 or 7 empty commercial spaces there on Clinton Boulevard. I'd love to see those filled. I understand just recently a couple of those sold, and we're looking to have those rehabilitated and hopefully open for new business as well too. Those empty spaces do have for sale or for rent sign on there, so I'd love to see those be filled up with some of the local businesses. There's been a lot of requests from the citizens about some of the large shopping centers and things too. Interestingly, several years ago, we were looking at that too, and the biggest problem with that, we had no place to put them. There was no place that we could put a large shopping center. Well, during the last few years, we have opened Hempstead Boulevard, and we have some prime location for some large commercial developments. Also have some behind the old, or behind the Tractor Supply on it too, and so we've got the space there too. We need to market what we have and what we do. Sometimes it's a little difficult to do that. We need to start that with the local developers to put together a plan and then invite the large companies to come, and then that's the way we get in the large shopping centers to fill up those spaces that we now have available here in town.
Mr. Hardy, what specific plans do you have to promote economic development in Clinton?
Again, thank you, Randy. The city of Clinton has to continue to develop what I call a business-friendly economy. Right? Now, that's an economy that's going to attract a range of businesses such as retail, restaurants, business, professional, as well as knowledge-based businesses. You're walking the streets of Ward 2. I've heard time and time again that our residents desire more restaurants and more retail. I think we all get that. But those kind of businesses follow growth. And there's a growing gap between the availability of housing that we have here in Clinton and the many young professionals and their families that would like to be able to call Clinton home. So one of the things I think we need to do is to continue to maintain as well as revitalize our existing neighborhoods and make sure that they're well maintained. And also develop highly attractive new housing developments. This is going to meet not just the needs of people that want to move in, but also, again, those residents that already live here. The growth of jobs and business investment in the community doesn't happen by accident. It's got to be intentional. My opponent just said that he'd love to see those spaces that are empty filled. So would I, but I would do something about it. I'm not just going to love to see them filled. I actually, in the first week of being in the position, would make the suggestion to the rest of our aldermen for the creation of a Friends of Economic Development Task Force. This would be the city, led by the city's Economic Development Director, Gabriel Prado, and would consist of the business leaders, the community leaders, the thought leaders here in our community to act as a strategic steering body to help us grow. Because let's be honest, it's not about my opinion or Jim's opinion. It's about your opinion. And what better way to gather your opinion than have you actually be involved in the economic development of our community? So I think if we continue to focus on those things, not only will Clinton prosper, but I think that the citizens of Clinton will feel like we are more transparent, that they're involved in government, and they actually have a say.
Mr. Martin, follow up?
One thing that's kind of interesting that I've seen too, when we talk about the large shopping centers too, if you've ever, when you travel around and you see a large shopping center, it may have an anchor, let's say a Target. And if you look at that, you see the smaller commercial businesses that are around it, the chains as well too. Look at an Academy Sports. They have some businesses beside that too. But if you go to another town and look at a Target, they've got the same core businesses around them too, and the same with Academy and the other big box stores too. It's not just as easy as calling Target and say, hey, we've got some land here in Clinton, come on. You know, they want to see that you've really got a property and you've got a developer that will work to put the whole project together. So it takes a lot of different moving parts to do that. We do have a very fine economic development director, and we've been working along those two, but you've got to start with the local developer, somebody that's willing to put the project together, and then to invite the large development to come in. And that's the way we're going to get the large developments in. And again, having a friendly city for the small development, that should come too.
Mr. Hardy, some final thoughts on economic development?
Yeah, look, I think economic development is so important to our city. I think every alderman would agree with that, alderwoman, as well as also our citizens. I'm just wondering, again, if your track record of voting matters. Because my opponent voted against the creation of the Economic Development Department. I don't know why. On March 2nd, just this past week, he voted against adding an additional new business right here in Clinton. Now, I know he voiced some concerns on the structure of that particular business, but it's still a vote against economic development. See, I believe as an alderman, you have to be a leader. You have to show the managerial courage to not only just stand up and vote yes or no, but to come up with meaningful solutions. That's what 26 years of experience in business has taught me. I can't just vote yes or no. I'm going to make it happen.
Gentlemen, the American public demands more transparency of government at all levels. And so I'm going to ask you what, how much importance you place on openness in government. And Mr. Hardy, we'll start with you. If you were elected, what would you do to improve communication and transparency in city government?
Thank you for the question, Randy. Look, I think it starts with 4 words, and that is open, honest, fair, and consistent. But I also think it takes personal accountability. It's personal accountability for your voting record. It's personal accountability for your business dealings. And a willingness to be able to share those in a way that is transparent and beyond reproach. When we talk about transparency, though, there's something else that really strikes in my core. And it really comes from walking the streets in the neighborhoods of Ward 2 over the last several weeks. And that's 2 more words, present and available. You've got to be willing to actually walk the streets of Clinton. You've got to be willing to actually talk to the residents of Clinton. Listen to those people. Listen to their families, because it's a privilege that you have to represent them. In the business world, we call that management by walking around. You can't solve a problem at a level different from which it was created. And so if you're going to represent people, you better get their opinion. Once again, I'm saying, because it doesn't matter what I think. I want to represent you, the voters in Ward 2, the families here in Clinton. The only way I can do that is to spend time with you. The only way I can do that is to listen to you. Someone once told me that if you're going to serve anyone, then you have to listen to everyone. I promise that I won't just listen during the campaign. I will listen all 4 years. I'll be available all 4 years. I will be your voice in the city of Clinton.
Mr. Martin, what else can we do in Clinton to improve the amount of transparency?
Transparency is a word that gets thrown around a lot. You hear it a lot in the city, in the county, the states, and the national governments as well too. But what is truly transparent is the citizens are entitled to know everything that their elected officials are doing. They need to know where every penny of the tax dollar is being spent. I think that sometimes it's very easy to promote the good things that we do in town, but with transparency, you need to tell about the wonderful things, the good things, the not so good things, and maybe even the awful things that there are some. Transparency includes all of those and being able for people to really know what's going on. I think we do a good job of promoting good things in town, and that gets to be sort of a fine line sometimes too. You want to promote the good things that we do in town, but our citizens are entitled to know the things that may be wearing out, the things that need fixing, the things that need improving on there. I'm not so sure that we do such a good job with that. As an alderman, I have tried to raise those issues and tried to let people know what's going on and not just gloss over or spin those things so that sometimes we're not always aware of what's going on. I I think we need to be transparent both in government and transparent with our elected officials too. I believe I'm very transparent in everything I've done. On my campaign website, it spells out in detail all of the things I've been involved with, everything I do, and I think that being transparent about candidates is good too. Talked about my law practice, what I've done over the years, talked about all of the civic and church activities I've been involved in, and I think that's critical for what you do. When you hide behind generalities and things like that, you're not being open and transparent. And I think I have tried to do that and would like to see all of the candidates in the city be real transparent in everything they've done, what type of businesses they've been involved with, and what they do.
Mr. Hardy, follow up on government transparency?
Look, I would agree with you. I think, again, that our candidates, as well as also our existing members of the city council, need to be transparent in both their voting record as well as also their business meetings. But I also, again, believe that transparency involves spending time with people. I've spent the last several weeks not only talking to citizens that live here, but also our former mayor, our current mayor. I'm also the mayoral candidates running against our current mayor. I've talked to existing board members. I've also talked to former board members. I've talked to board members that are running for the current office. Again, part of transparency is you've got to be willing to talk to the people that you're supposed to be transparent to. There is no transparency if you're not willing to talk to the people that you have the privilege to serve.
Mr. Martin, any final thought?
I have lived here in Clinton. My office is here in Clinton. I've been very accessible. You can find me just about any time. I too walk streets. I do talk to folks too. I think I am very accessible and always enjoy hearing from people and hearing responses, and so that is very important. I have a track record of doing that over the last 7 years and will continue to do that as well in another term.
Up to this point, our questions have been general topics that people all across the city are interested in. Now we want to get specific to the part of Clinton where you live, your ward, Ward 2. And if you are elected or re-elected as the representative of that ward, I want to ask each of you, what do you see as the most pressing issue in Ward 2 right now? We'll start with Mr. Martin.
The most pressing issue in Ward 2 is infrastructure, street paving, and drainage. We have, I sort of feel like I'm a broken record sometimes. I've been talking for the last 5, 6, 7 years about our need to keep our infrastructure up. I primarily talked about road paving. We talked about how bad our roads were and were getting. And the board got together and looked to create a plan on addressing our street paving. We learned that an average street lasts 10 years, sometimes longer, sometimes less, depending on the travel and the heavy trucks and things too. But the plan was that we would repave 1/10 of our streets every year. Once we got those paved and got on that formula, and we would not have the street problems that we're experiencing today. It was thought that $1 billion to $1.2 million would cover 1/10 of our street paving each year. The board got up to $1 million and thought we were getting close to that, and we contacted our paving contractors and said, we've got $1 billion and here are our worst streets. How many streets can we pave with that $1 million? And they came back and said, well, here's how many streets we can pave with $1 million. I looked at it and said, that's not anywhere near 1/10 of our streets. So I went back and worked with our city engineer and found out that with the miles of streets that we have in town, that it would take more like $2.5 to $3 million a year to pave 1/10 of our streets each year. So that $1 million we were looking at wasn't going to come anywhere near what we needed to do to address that. So we've gotten some money from state and local county, but then in the budget we've diverted that money to other things. I think that has been not in light of transparency, and I think that that's not something that we should have done.
Mr. Hardy, biggest issue that you see in Ward 2?
Yeah, look, this is a great question. And once again, rather than telling you what I think, I'm going to tell you what the citizens of Ward 2 have told me over the last 2 weeks as I've walked their neighborhoods and I've walked our neighborhoods and our streets. Walking in Old Vineyard, I met a lady who told me, you know, Jared, I haven't allowed anybody to put a sign in my yard since I've lived here, and I've been in Clintonian all my life. But it's time for change. Go ahead and put your sign in my yard. Walking Countrywood, I had a chance to talk to Derek and Karen Adams. You know the first thing they told me? We need more retail. We need more restaurants. I'm tired of taking my hard-earned money to Flowood and to Madison and Brandon and Pearl. Jared, can you help? When I walked over to Oakhurst, Mr. Odom, I knocked on his door and he says, you know what, you're the first person to stop by my house in almost 8 years. He says, you got my vote if I can show you something. I said, sure, so what did you want to show me? He walked me out to the edge of his road and showed me a buckled curb in which water collected right down the front. And he says, you know what, I've never even seen an alderman or a city council member to be able to show me this. When I walked to the neighborhood of Cotton Acres and talked to Brad, Rick, and McCann, they talked to me about economic growth. You see, they're realtors, right? There's less than 30 houses available to be able to sell here in the city of Clinton. When I walked with McRaven Road, I talked to Justin and Megan Strickler, who have 5 kids. You know what their concern is? Parks and recreation. That's where the $1 million went that Jim talks about being mysteriously diverted. It went into investing in our parks and recreation. And last but not least, and I want to use this as a straight quote. I had a concerned resident send this to me just today. This individual said, for almost 16 years at my home, answers to my issues regarding the city of Clinton have come from an alderman outside of my ward, or someone other than my actual alderman. My older neighbors, and I truly appreciate an alderman that is willing to help, regardless of what their ward is. I've been in Clinton for almost 41 years, and my parents grew up here as well, Jared. Can you please help?
All right, response, Mr. Martin?
It is always interesting to talk to the citizens of Ward 2 and other citizens as well, too. Again, I have heard the same things as Mr. Hardy just mentioned, that some people like too, but by far, the biggest response that I've heard from folks is we've got to have streets. We can't have the potholes that we've got now. We've got to repair those streets. The other things are good, and the other things are worth doing too, but you asked what was the number one concern of the people in Ward 2. I'll stick with my answer. That is the street paving, and then drainage comes after that too. The other things are important and need to be addressed. I did vote against the diversion of the money from the roads, and some of that did go into Parks and Rec. I fully support Parks and Rec, and I believe we could have done those things by finding those funds in the budget other than raiding the street paving funds to do that. So we've got a lot of needs in Clinton. We've got to prioritize them, and Ward 2 and across the city as well too.
Follow up, Mr. Hardy?
I'm just going to go back to something my mom taught me when I was really young. And that was, she said to me, she said, Jared, you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to know where to find them. I believe that the voice of the citizens of Clinton matters. I believe that when they share what bothers them, that matters. It doesn't, I have to let that override what I think. And yes, of course streets are important. Of course, making sure that our drainage works is important. But I'm never going to tell a citizen of Clinton that what I think is more important than what they think. It is a privilege to represent them. It's a privilege to be able to voice their concerns. And if elected as your alderman, that's exactly what I would do.
All right, our final question is a topic that we just touched on a moment ago in terms of funding, and it has to do with quality of life issues and specifically parks and recreation. And what we want to know is, Mr. Hardy, we'll start with you, what you see as maybe the most pressing parks and recreation issue. What sort of improvements do we need to see made here in Clinton?
Park and recreation is an important part of our economy. When I think about the quality of life here in Clinton, it's got to continue to improve and reflect the needs and the demands of our local residents. The quality of life has become an increasingly important key economic development factor, and that is true not just here in Clinton, but across the entire state. You know what keeps me up at night is when I look to our neighbors just to the west over in Vicksburg. They've spent over $20 million to be able to put in a new park facility. It's beautiful. Why aren't we doing the same? When I think about economic development, parks and recreation, I begin to take a look at meeting minutes. I begin to think about voting records. And if someone is truly for parks and recreation, then I don't understand why it is that they voted against it. You know, it's something near and dear to me because every single day, my wife meets up with a friend of hers. See, we all have kids who are in different schools, right? Whether it's Lubbock or East Side or North Side. Sometimes it's hard to pick up your kids all at the same time because there's 3 or 4 different schools involved. And my wife meets her friend, you know where? Lions Club Park. Lions Club Park. And every time when I see those children playing there and smiling and laughing, I want to go back to the voting record and see who voted for it and who voted against it. Because, listen, we could pave our streets with gold. It doesn't matter if you have nowhere to drive. Economic development is dependent on quality of life. It's dependent on increasing parks and recreation, continuing to upgrade and enhance parks and recreation. I heard earlier one of the candidates talk about upgrading a Traceway Park to include artificial turf. Why aren't we looking at that? Why hasn't the existing board looked at that? And if they have, why aren't they telling anybody? I think it's an important part of quality of life. I think it's important to continue to invest in things we do here in our community. I just don't understand why anybody would vote against it.
Mr. Martin, as a member of the board, what have you done to enhance the parks and recreation opportunities in Clinton, and what would you continue to do?
I spent 8 years coaching youth soccer at Traceway, and that was some of the more fun Saturdays that I've ever had in my life on this. So I'm very fond of the Parks and Recs and how important that is to the city as well, too. During the 7 years I've been on board, we have made some tremendous improvements in our Parks and Rec. I have been in favor of every bit of it. I have had some concerns that we've been diverting road money to that. I believe we could have done everything we have done for Parks and Rec and still been able to take care of the streets as well, too. So I'm not anti-parks. I am all for parks and what we're doing and continuing to do that as well, too. In Ward 2, we do not have a city park. The dividing line in Ward 2 is Clinton Raymond Road, so Brighton Park is right across the street. We kind of claim that as part of Ward 2, but it's not officially in there. What I would like to see is that we have a walking bike trail down Clinton Raymond Road from Midway to Brighton Park. That way, the folks in Old Vineyard, in Oakhurst, in Countrywood, and Cotton Acres could all come out of their neighborhoods and either walk or bike down to Brighton Park and either make the loop for their exercise or stay in Brighton Park and participate in some other activities there too. I would like to see that in Ward 2. Another thing that's sort of maybe too sky high is Butts Park is right across from Spring Ridge Road. Butts Park is owned by Jackson, and it's and that park is not well preserved by Jackson. We've made some communication efforts with them. I would love for the city of Clinton to pick up Butts Park and develop that as a park in South Clinton, and then tie that in with Mississippi College's cross-country trails right next to it too. Again, that may be dreaming a little too big, but I like to dream.
Follow up, Mr. Hardy.
Yeah, look, I think both of those ideas are actually fabulous ideas. The idea of bringing in Butts Park into the city of Clinton, the idea of creating a walking trail that will connect Ward 2 here to Brighton, I'm just wondering when Jim's going to bring that to the board. All right? Managerial courage. Is the courage to stand up and actually take action. I think upgrading and enhancing our parks, walking trails, and other recreational places is, of course, super important. But at the end of the day, you've got to be the leader that's willing to stand up, to make a motion, stand up and do the research. You've got to be able to put these ideas forth. Once again, I'm not just going to love to see something happen. I'm going to make it happen.
Response, Mr. Martin.
These things have been discussed by me, have been encouraged by me too. Again, you work those things out in budget sessions. And again, sometimes you're able to fund them immediately, sometimes it takes a little longer. But I can assure you, we've been doing that. I've been advocating for our Parks and Rec, and we have had some tremendous improvements over the years that I've been here. And despite what the comments were that sounded negative, I'm a Parks and Rec guy. We'll support that.
All right, we appreciate your responses to the questions, and we move on now to closing remarks. Each of you will have up to 2 minutes to give us some final comments, and we'll start with Mr. Martin.
It has been my pleasure to serve as Alderman in Ward 2 for the past 7 years. At my church, we had a program that you tried to figure out what your gift were. And I thought, well, that's an easy one too. My gift is service. I love to serve. I'm an attorney. I love to help people. I take nothing better than taking pleasure in being able to serve someone in a legal capacity. I have served the community with a number of boards and organizations civic organizations in town. I've been a lifelong member of First Baptist Church in Clinton, served on committees and boards there, deacons, board of trustees, just a number of committees and boards there at the church. I love to serve. I love to serve the city of Clinton, and that's why I chose 4 years ago to run for alderman, so that I could give back to the city of Clinton that I was born and raised and loved and invested in. Service is what I like to do. I love to talk to people. I walk streets. I see people in the Kroger. I see people in the church. I see people in the parks. I see people everywhere else too. I think I'm accessible. I think I listen, and I also do promote ideas, talk about things too. I hope I have done a good job representing the citizens of Ward 2 over the last 7 years, and hopefully as the city as a whole. I certainly want to listen to what the citizens in Ward 2 have to say and try to be responsive to them, but also realize it's not Ward 2 against Ward 5 and Ward 1 against Ward 3. We're all in this together. And I like to serve Ward 2 and also the city as a whole. And I think I have done that over the past 7 years. I think my track record, despite some of the comments that were made today, don't rely that show that I have done that.
Mr. Hardy, your closing statement.
Again, thank you, Randy. I think the best way for me to close out my remarks today is by telling a story. It's been about 4+ years ago, but I was walking around the back hallways of the business I'm involved with, and I saw a young lady named Michelle. She was walking towards me in a very hurried manner. It was obvious that she was very upset with tears running down her face. I quickly approached her because I was concerned. Like, this is one of my team members. This is one of the people that I serve as her leader. And I looked at her and I said, Michelle, what's wrong? She paused and she said, nothing. I said, Michelle, you're obviously upset. We've known each other now for several years. I know your family. I know you. I've seen you grow and prosper here. What's wrong? And she said, Jared, I don't want to tell you. I kind of got a quizzical look on my face, and I said, okay, I'm like, I wish you would. And she says, well, Jared, I don't want to tell you because I know you'll do something about it. As your alderman, that's what I will do. I will do something about it. When I think about hearing the comments, hearing the questions, hearing the concerns of the people that I have encountered on the streets of the neighborhoods of Ward 2, I'll do something about it. When I want to see economic development, I'm going to walk over to the mayor's office. I'm going to walk over to Gabriel's office because I'm going to want to do something about it. You see, being a businessman over the last 26 years, and I'll tell you especially in the last year, has given me some of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in my entire life. Difficult, hard decisions. The difference between being a politician and being a business person, I don't get the luxury of voting yes or no. I've got to figure it out. I've got to save people's jobs. I've got to make sure that they can continue to work tomorrow. That requires that you make decisions. It requires that you listen to everybody involved. I promise you, I'll do something about it.
All right, thanks to both of you, and we'll turn it back over to Kate.
Thank you, candidates. We appreciate you sharing with the voters. And I can imagine the voters will see both of you between now and the primary election. So good luck as you go to meet your voters in your ward. Thank you to everyone that has helped today. I want to remind voters that it's April 6th, 7 to 7. And tell me where the voting place is.
Wildwood Baptist Church.
Yes, Wildwood Baptist Church for Ward 2. I want to remind everyone also that not enough people are choosing the leaders for the city of Clinton. It may not be unusual for other cities, but out of 17,000 voters, only about 4,000 take part in municipal elections. So get on it, get out there and vote, and remind your neighbors to go vote. Thank you.